We have all heard ghost stories, maybe local legends in your own towns, or maybe you've done a ghost tour in some old city where they tell tales of candles flickering. The guide whispers about what happened in this room or that hallway or those stairs. Maybe you've even seen the videos. They always seem to be grainy, shaky, someone's phone camera catching something in a doorway that wasn't there a second ago. And whether you believe any of it or not, you know exactly what a ghost looks like. They're almost always in some kind of old-fashioned clothing, pale, and their hair is loose. But what about those that died young? Like the people who grew up watching TRL and buying their jeans at Hot Topic, or putting butterfly clips in their hair. So where is that ghost? Where is the apparition in the low-rise flared jeans and midriff top, standing at the end of your hallway at 3 a.m. going, "It's Britney, bitch"? Where is that ghost? Maybe it's just that particular trope doesn't inspire the same kind of fear as the Victorian ghost. Or maybe it's just too close to home and would trigger something about our own mortality that we're just not ready to deal with quite yet. I'm Tara Peralt, and you're listening to Psychology of the Strange, part of the Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side. I want to start off by talking about one of the most widely reported apparitions in the world, and what makes her genuinely strange. Not horror movie strange, but anthropologically strange, is that she doesn't belong to any one culture. She is the woman in white, and she shows up everywhere. Roads, bridges, waterways, the edges of forests, the sides of highways at 2 a.m. She's pale, dressed in white, usually young, and almost always carrying some tragic story underneath the surface of the encounter. The specifics shift depending on where you are, and they shift in ways that feel locally true, which is part of what makes the whole thing so difficult to dismiss. In Mexico and across Latin America, she is La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman. The details change slightly from region to region, from family to family, but the bones of it stay pretty consistent. She was a woman, beautiful and desperate, who drowned her own children in a river after being abandoned or betrayed by the man she loved. And when she arrived at the gates of whatever comes after this life, she was turned away, or maybe she was just sent back, because she had come without her children. So now she wanders. You can hear her before you see her. A sound that makes people describe it as somewhere between a wail and a cry that doesn't always sound entirely human anymore. And if you hear her, you should run. You should not look back, and you should never try to help her. Just run as quickly as you can. In the Philippines, she's the White Lady of Balete Drive. And this one has a texture that feels almost modern, even though the reports go back decades. Balete Drive is a real street in Quezon City, lined with old acacia and balete trees, the kind of trees that in Filipino folklore are considered homes for spirits. Taxi drivers have refused to work that route alone at night for generations. The story goes that she appears in the back seat. You catch her in the rear view, pale, white dress, sometimes with a face and sometimes without one. And by the time you've processed what you're seeing, she's already gone. There are enough accounts and drivers who have independently described the same exact thing, that the road has become something of a pilgrimage site for people who want to test their own nerve. Now in Ireland and Scotland, she takes a different shape. The Bean Nighe, the washer at the ford. A woman found at the edge of streams washing the burial clothes of those who are about to die. She's not malevolent, exactly, but she's not safe either. Seeing her means your time is close. She's a messenger, a harbinger, something that stands at the threshold between what is living and what is not, and looks back at you without any sympathy. Now, in the American Midwest, she's Resurrection Mary, and this version has a little bit different kind of weight. The story is set along Archer Ave in Justice, Illinois, outside a ballroom called the Willow Brook, which was the kind of place where young people went dancing in the 1930s. She was a young woman, always described as blonde, always in a white dress, always with an old-fashioned look to her, and she's seen hitchhiking along the road late at night. She asks for a ride. She's quiet, a little cold to sit next to, and she directs the driver to let her out at Resurrection Cemetery, and then she's gone. She just disappears like she was never there. The report started in the 1930s, and they have never really stopped. There's different names and different tragedies threaded through every version. She's anchored in time in a way that almost no other folklore figure manages to be. You can't date her from her description alone. The dress is always described as simple, as white, as plain enough that it could belong to almost any era in history. She's not wearing something that places her in 1887 or 1978. She exists outside of the wardrobe problem entirely, which is part of why she keeps working, keeps generating new reports, and keeps showing up in new cities and new decades without anyone stopping to wonder why she looks like she's from another century. In colonial Mexico, she carries the grief of a woman abandoned under patriarchal systems with no recourse and nowhere to go. In 1930 Chicago, she carries loneliness of a young woman who died before she got to finish being young. In the Philippines, she's a little older and more elemental and tied to the specific folklore of a landscape where the boundary between the living and the dead has always been considered more permeable than it is elsewhere. The shape of the tragedy underneath her changes, but it always involves a woman who was failed in some type of way, and who came back from whatever is on the other side of death, not at peace. There's something worth noting in the fact that the most universal ghost story in the world is fundamentally a story about what happens to women who are not protected. She died because she was failed, and now she's dangerous. And the two things are connected. But today, what matters most about her is simpler than gender politics. What matters is that she works. She has always worked across centuries, oceans, and languages that share no common root. People encounter her, they fear her, and they report her. And they report her in white. She is simple and timeless. So here's the question underneath all of this. If ghosts exist, then people have been dying in every decade, in every era, in every kind of clothing imaginable. And those that come back should reflect fashion from across the ages. You should be getting the Victorian woman in the long dress and the guy from 1987 in a members-only jacket, and the teenager from 2003. The haunted house should be a wardrobe department spanning 4 centuries, and yet the accounts are almost suspiciously consistent. And I'm not saying that nobody ever reports a ghost in Crocs or a tracksuit, but they do tend to be a lot less common. They tend to arrive in the same costumes that pulls in a very specific direction: old, timeless, tragic, and pre-industrial. And that consistency has an explanation that starts somewhere most people wouldn't think to look. And that's in the 7th century, when Pope Gregor I decided he'd like to tell some ghost stories. Now, Pope Gregor I is not exactly a household name, but he did something in the turn of the 7th century that shaped the entire Western imagination around death and what comes after it. He broke with the early Christian tradition by refusing to deny a bridge between the living and the dead. Instead, he leaned into it. He started using ghost stories as a pastoral device, a way of arguing that the dead were still suffering for their sins, still reachable and in need of something from the living. Pray for them, make restitution on their behalf. The ghost came back because it had unfinished business, because it had sinned and not repented, because something on earth was left undone, and the soul could not move forward until it was resolved. This became the foundational architecture of the Western ghost, a figure defined by incompleteness, by guilt, by the need of something it could not get on its own. Medieval theologians built on this. The ghost became an instrument for promoting belief in purgatory, a way station between life and whatever comes after, where souls worked off their karmic debt before moving on. And the living had a role to play in that process, mostly through prayers and remembrance. The ghost story became a theological transaction, which meant ghost stories were everywhere. They were told from pulpits, embedded in sermons, and circulating through communities as moral instructions dressed up as horror. You know, the good old-fashioned penny dreadfuls. The ghost was always someone who had died badly, usually in sin, with things unresolved. And that figure had to look a certain way, tragic and caught between worlds. And their clothing, of whatever era, was considered to be sufficiently distant from the present to feel like the realm of the dead. And that template calcified. It moved through centuries of literature, through the Victorian spiritualism movement, through seance culture and photography of the dead. Photographing the dead was a pretty widespread practice in the 19th century, where families would photograph their deceased relatives, sometimes posed as if they were still living. They even would prop their eyes open. Death became an aesthetic in a very specific direction during the Victorian era, and that aesthetic became the ghost's permanent wardrobe. The long dress, the pallor, the hollow eyes, the sense of something ancient and tragic caught in a moment it can't leave. Every ghost story you absorbed growing up, every haunted house movie or candlelit ghost tour in some old city where the guide whispered about what happened, all of it was reinforced through the same schema and template, building the same set of expectations about what a ghost looks like and how an encounter with one feels. The ghost schema is extremely well developed and has been in continuous reinforcement for over 1,000 years. So when you encounter something that you can't immediately explain, you know, like a shadow at the end of the hallway or a figure at the edge of your vision, it reaches for that. It really makes me think about the story that circulates about the arrival of the European ships to the Americas, where the indigenous people were standing on the shore, and they struggled at first to make sense of what they were seeing, because nothing in their existing experience gave them a category for the vessels of that size moving across open water. Now, we can't know exactly what was happening in the minds of the people on that shore, and the historical record around this story is complicated. But the mechanism underneath maps onto something real and really well documented in cognitive science. The brain, when confronted with something genuinely outside its existing categories, searches for the closest available schema. And when that experience is brief or ambiguous, or there's low light or maybe high stress or the particular vulnerability of 3 a.m. in an unfamiliar house, or even a familiar one that tends to make the noises of old houses settling at night, that search tends to land on whatever template is most deeply worn into the mind. Ghost sightings almost always happen in those conditions: the low light and sleep deprivation, high emotional arousal. The space is already primed by reputation. Ghost tourism actively maintains that schema. Every tour that takes place in those old buildings, every account of what previous visitors saw, that schema becomes reinforced. So you arrive already knowing what you're supposed to see. So when something happens that you can't explain, you subconsciously reach for that figure that has been reinforced. Whether the ghost is a product of schema or whether it's something else entirely depends almost entirely on what you think the mind is and what you think happens to it when the body stops. Arthur Schopenhauer was a German philosopher, and he was dubbed the philosopher of pessimism. And he had a surprisingly generous position on ghost sightings. He considered them potential glimpses of a dimension beyond our normal perceptions of space and time. He called them the afterglow of consciousness. The idea being that what we experience as a haunting might be a genuine bleed-through from a layer of reality that ordinary waking perception is too limited to access. Schopenhauer's broader philosophy held that the world we perceive is just the surface, the representation, and underneath it, something he called the will. A blind, churning force that is the actual substance of everything. Consciousness, in his framework, is not reducible to the body. It participates in something larger than the individual, which means the question of what happens to it after the body dies is open in a way that a strict materialism would not allow. He wasn't arguing that ghosts are real in the way a ghost tour guide means it. He was arguing that the universe is structured in a way that makes the question meaningful, that there's something more to the mind than just the meat suit, and that the encounters people report across cultures and centuries might be pointing at something true, even if the Victorian wardrobe they arrive in is entirely a product of the perceiver. And then there's Gilbert Ryle, and he comes along and he complicates the whole foundation of it. So Ryle was a 20th century British philosopher, and his most famous contribution was a phrase, the ghost in the machine, which he intended as a devastating critique. He was taking aim at the Cartesian dualism, the idea inherited from Descartes that the mind is a separate, immaterial thing residing inside the physical body, like a pilot in a cockpit. Ryle called this a category mistake, the kind of error you make when you watch a university tour, see all the colleges and libraries, and then ask where the university is, as if the university was a separate thing rather than the name for the whole system of things you just looked at. The mind, Ryle argued, is not a ghost living inside the machine of the body. It's a way of describing what the body does. Consciousness is not a separate substance floating around waiting to be liberated from flesh. It's inseparable from the physical processes that produce it. So if Ryle is right, ghosts don't have a philosophical leg to stand on. There is no immaterial consciousness to linger after death. There's no soul with unfinished business, no afterglow of awareness bleeding through the fabric of perception. The haunting, then, is entirely a product of the haunted, a schema looking for somewhere to land. But if Schopenhauer is right, the schema might be obscuring something real rather than inventing something false. The ghost exists, but the exact details get filtered out somewhere between the actual encounter and the brain's attempt to process it. But neither Schopenhauer or Ryle fix the wardrobe problem. So if Schopenhauer is right, and consciousness persists in some form after death, why would it arrive in period dress? Why would it conform to the aesthetic expectations of the perceiver? Either the ghost is wearing what the perceiver expects it to wear, which suggests the perceiver is generating the image, or there's something about the nature of whatever persists after death that naturally reaches for the forms most legible to the living mind encountering it. Both of those possibilities are strange in their own ways. And then, of course, there's the reinforcement loop, which is a thing that makes me think the cultural script around ghosts might be self-sealing. Hollywood keeps trying to update that schema with different movies and TV shows that show more modern ghosts. And some of those attempts work beautifully as films, but they don't always seem to be rewriting the experiential template, the one that shows up in actual reported sightings or on ghost tours or social media posts where someone's phone caught something in the corner of the frame. The accounts keep arriving in the same costumes, and the woman in white keeps standing on the same road. But we'll make allowances for her because she could be from any era. But this suggests that the schema is not being maintained by entertainment. Entertainment has been trying to update it and somehow failing. The schema is being maintained by the accounts themselves, by every person who has genuinely had some sort of experience they can't explain and reaches for the available template to describe it, and in doing so, reinforcing the template for the next person. It's a constant feedback loop with no obvious entry point for disruption. The ghost looks old because the accounts say the ghost looks old, and the accounts say the ghost looks old because the ghost looks old. And it's just a continuous cycle. There was a historian named Tanya Stabler-Miller, and she might offer a different explanation entirely. She argued that the ghosts we encounter are the ones who fought their way back from purgatory, who had enough prayers said on their behalf, enough restitution made, enough karmic debt cleared to earn their way through. So that might mean that the older style of dress and that particular fashion sense of ghosts is because they're the ones who made it back. And maybe the ghost from 2007 screaming, "It's Britney, bitch," just hasn't made her way back from purgatory yet. So pray for her. I want to thank you for listening to Psychology of the Strange, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to add a little more strange between episodes, make sure to find me on socials at PsychStrangePod. And if you want to help support the production of the next show, think about buying me a coffee. Find the link in the show notes. Until next time, stay curious and stay strange.